Hey guys, Lenny Reed, Dynomite Difference Products. Wanted to share some stuff with you today that will help our competitors who are paying attention watching this video as well. But is it more important to not teach the competitors, or is it more important to teach you, the consumer? I feel like it's more important to teach you. We're not cheap, never going to be cheap, and I'll tell you why. We spend way too much money on tools to try and make sure that you guys that are buying our product are getting the absolute best product that anybody in the United States can actually make. Tools are critical. Once you get the tools, you try a bunch of stuff, and fortunately the government gives us a write-off for research and development, so we can then write off a bunch of the parts that we shoot, waste, burn, thrash, kill, accidentally mess up, purposely mess up. You get the point, right? So you're not paying for a lot of that product. Our government is, thank God. And basically I just want to talk about the unicorn in the room. Do you get it? Elephant in the room, unicorn in the room. Not funny? Funny? We'll see. Unicorn in the room. The perfect nozzle. Is there a perfect nozzle? Yes. Is it the same for every nozzle? No. Piston bowls are different in diameter. Basically, when the nozzle sprays, the fuel travels from the center out, 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 out. The further the distance traveled, the more oxygen you're actually going to burn, because the flame actually starts at the right at the closest point of the piston. We don't want to punch the piston with raw fluid, because then it's just raw fluid and it's going to do wet stacking. Wet stacking is not good because it's actually going to fill the piston bowls with diesel, and then when it comes up on boost, it's going to like buck and snort and pop and do stupid things until it finally gets that wet stack fuel burnt out. And then it's going to clear its throat, it's going to take off and run like a champ. Wet stacking super common in like sled pull stuff, where they've got really big spray holes, and all of the machine work was done with older tools. They're big, and they're ugly, and they're nasty, and they don't really atomize that well. The reason they make power is because they're big, and they shove a lot of boost down their throat, and they create a lot of intake air temperature, and it finally burns, and then it goes like a rape date. On the street, those motors would feel horrible. It might make 3,000 horsepower, but it wouldn't feel very good, because trying to drive off a stoplight, it's going to barely leave the stoplight. So the perfect spray hole, the perfect spray nozzle, it's always a different recipe for every different bowl and piston configuration, nozzle protrusion. There's a lot that goes into it, so we're constantly tweaking things to try and make the perfect spray nozzle for each application. Recently, we've updated our 04 and after 07s to a sack style 6-hole spray pattern. They're glorious. I hated driving all 5.9s until this nozzle, because every 5.9 you get in, even back when you bought your 2006 truck, they always kind of pinged and rattled and carried on, and anything you did for performance improvement made them ping and rattle even more. So then tuning came out, and tuning was able to clear up some of that. Not all of it. But now, even on stock tuned truck with a set of 50s or 90s, no pinging, no tuning, no nothing bad. They just run really nice. It's much more like driving a brand new 6.7 liter Cummins rather than a 2004, 2005, 2006 5.9 Cummins. So constantly updating things, constantly changing things, kind of the Dynomite difference. And we're really not good about letting you guys know what the Dynomite difference is. So today is your day to learn what some of those little things are. Injector nozzle flow rate. Flow rate is, given any pump design, how much diesel are you going to get through that nozzle, starts with flow rate. Flow rate is changed by spray hole size, K factor, hole count, and we measure that in liters per minute, which is a really old gauge. It's a Gilmont tool. It's like 500 bucks, not very much. Super accurate. People make fun of it. People have made fun of it for a very long time. We were offered the opportunity to purchase a $250,000 flow meter a long time ago, and I sent some parts out and had them ran on that flow meter, and they came back, like if I said it was going to be 60 liters a minute, they came back and said it was actually 60.3 or 60.4 or 60 point, who cares? At that point, the difference was so minute, no factory, Cummins, Ford, Bosch, GM, nobody would have ever actually cared, because they're usually off by about 2 or 3 liters of air per minute. When we got the new AFM machine, we sent the AccuCal out and had them write our software in our new abrasive flow machine, which measures nozzle flow as it's processing the part, and it measures it in liters per minute. So all of our old recipes still hold true today. Much to their surprise, our $500 flow meter was very accurate. The new machine is capable of one thing which is really cool, which is I can say 60.1, 60.2, 60.3. So we did pick up a little bit of accuracy for that. As the future comes, spray hole size is going down and pressure is going up. So trying to make things more accurate is going to be important in the future. So we're already there. We already have a tool that can, like, 3 liters a minute on a P pump or a VE pump was absolutely nothing. You could not tell anything. 3 liters a minute on a common rail is basically what all of them came out. Like, they might target for 18 liters a minute, but you'll get them at 19, you'll get them at 17. So I'd say that's kind of a 17, 18, 19. That's 3 liter a minute deviation. None of the common rails really cared. Piezo style stuff like LML, L5P, Ford Power Stroke 6.7. The nozzle flow rate is a lot smaller now. The deviation is also smaller. So we see those parts coming in within 1 liter per minute on those, pretty good. As we modify them, we want to make sure that we're actually tightening that window up even tighter. So we have the tool to do that now. So liters per minute is, it's like climbing a ladder. And if you say, we're going to climb the ladder to 15 rungs, this is the ladder. We're going to climb it to 15 every single time. We always get the same spot. Now, hole count. If we have a nozzle with, say, 10 holes at 60 liters of air per minute, that's going to be a bunch of really small holes. Now, if I have a 4-hole nozzle at 60 liters of air per minute, that's 4 really big holes. Why do we have so many options? Well, because the 10-hole at 60 liters per minute won't flow the same gross volume as a 4-hole. The 5-hole won't flow as much as the 4-hole. It will drop off a little bit. 6-hole will not flow as much as the 5-hole. So the lower the hole count, the bigger the spray orifice, the more it's going to flow. But depending on what you're doing, that might not be what you're after. When you look at the tachometer, you want to figure out like about 1,000 to 1,200 RPM window on that tachometer where you actually plan to operate the vehicle. Based off that 1,200 RPM where you're constantly in, it could be, say, it could be basically, say, from 2,000 RPM up to about 3,200 RPM. If you're constantly in that window, which turbocharger size tells us about what RPM you're going to be spinning. If you call up and you say, I got a GT55 as a single, then that thing's only going to really run from about 4,600, 4,700 RPM up to just shy of 6,000 RPM. So with that, we're going to put you into, like, say, a 5 or a 6-hole nozzle, because we know that we want to give you a lot of fuel in a very short duration of time. But if you called up and said, man, I live at 10,000 feet of elevation and I tow, it's got stock gears, stock turbo, stock transmission, stock. Getting into this like 8, 9, 10-hole stuff will help atomize at those like 1,200 RPM up to, like, say, 22 to 2,500 RPM. And that nozzle is going to be better for you at that application in that really thin air. It may actually make 500 horsepower, but if you take it to the track and run against a 500 horsepower truck that's able to make 500 horsepower, say 1,000 RPM greater than you, you're going to lose the race. 500 horsepower is not 500 horsepower, is not 500 horsepower, not, get it? Get it? I hope that came out right. It's not all the same. You have to build your truck for what you're doing to truly make you happy. Now, percentage over, it's a very broad term. It's cast by a few people, and nobody has ever given me a real definition of that. But when people send in parts and they see that these are my 200% overs, I basically said, okay, well, if that's a 200% over, and I know that the stock nozzle flow rate was about 20 liters of air per minute, at 100% over it'd be 40, and at 200% over it'd be like 60. That is kind of how I think everybody's doing their percentage over. But again, we're using the flow gauge and giving it a liter per minute number, which isn't the end of everything either, because the body modifications is actually going to help or hurt the mm's cube that the motor runs on. So percentage over, it's a good sales tool. If you call me and you order a set of 400% and you don't like them, tough. You ordered 400%. You didn't ask for our opinion. You didn't tell us what you're doing. You bought 400%. 400% in our world is a really, really, really big injector. 15, 20, 30% is a really nice street-friendly injector. And depending on what you're going to do to the body and what modifications you're going to do to the truck, a 30% over injector nozzle on a hot body might be all you ever needed to make all your dreams come true. So percentage over, not my favorite term, but it's super common. Even shop owners hate it. I call up and, you know, they say, I'm just checking on people. How's things going? Man, actually, like, I've got to set 100% over from like XYZ123. I can't get the thing to run right. It does this, it does this, it does this. And I say, oh, well, that's a really big nozzle. What turbo's on it? Well, it's a LB7 with 100% overs and a stock turbocharger. Why? Like, 100% over nozzle bolted to one of our bodies is going to outperform the heck out of a stock turbocharger. You should have somewhere in the 15 to 30% on a stock turbocharger. If you got a 4 series charger, like an SXE 471 or something, you've actually got enough air to support 100% over, I could see that. But if you don't have that all blended together and working correctly, it's never going to work correctly. Okay, so percentage over, we're done with. Moving on. Spray hole size. We basically have these little tiny pieces of tungsten that start at 12 inches long, and every time they pop a hole, they get a little bit shorter, so they're consumable. We've got that starting at 2 thousandths and 7 tenths, and we go clear up to about 40 thousandths in wire diameter. And every single tenth of a thou, we pretty much have a piece of wire. We've got a few missing holes, I guess. But when you're trying to create the perfect spray orifice, you got to start with the correct hole size. In the past, when we were using OEM stuff, we were stuck using, if the nozzle came to us at 8 thou 3 tenths, and we chase it with an 8 thou 3 tenths piece of wire, even though we're going in there with the same diameter of wire, the water is actually what's doing the cutting, and we end up with about a 9.5 thou hole. There's like 1 thou plus a couple of tenths that it overshoots it. So going in very small steps is impossible, because you went from like 8.3 clear up to 9.5 in times 6 or 7 holes. The percentage jump is huge. And then before you run any abrasive flow media or extrude hone through it, you're already too big. So starting with the factory size nozzles, it just wasn't the way to do it, and it's very expensive to do it the way we're doing it now, because now we're having blanks made. We've got to buy them in very large batches, but when that nozzle shows up and we come up with the perfect recipe, we walk over and grab, say, 60 nozzles. We burn them with the exact same size piece of wire as recipe calls out. We put them in the abrasive flow machine. We add about 10% of lift, or nozzle flow rate lift, to whatever we burned it. So if we burned it with, example, let's just say we used a wire that was 4 thou 7 tenths. We're going to end up with about a 5 thou 7, 5 thou, about a 5 thou 9 or a 6 thou hole is what we're going to end up with. Now, let's say it's 6 by 5. So we got 6 holes, 5 thousandths of an inch. 6 holes, 5 thou. And that's going to give us X amount of liters per minute. So we're going to call that 6 at 5. We're going to say that's going to be about a 21 LPM nozzle. 6 holes, 5 thousandths of an inch hole diameter. It's going to equal about 21 liters of air per minute. That's not finished. If we give it to you like that, it's going to be incorrect. And this is where a lot of people don't have all the tools in-house, so they give it to you anyway. What they're giving you is this. So this is the needle valve, this is the nozzle, and this is a cutaway of, like, when I shove wire in right here, this hole is virtually perfectly straight, just a hard 90-degree internal, 90 here, 90 here, 90 there, 90 there. Needle valve comes to lift, and it's only going to lift a few thousandths of an inch. It's not going up an eighth of an inch. When that happens, anytime you've got fluid aiming in one direction, especially under pressure, it's going to come this direction. When the needle valve comes off lift, it's going to overshoot, and then it's going to start to come here. So in this pocket area right here, we end up with like a low pressure area. So let's just say that this is my, what did I say, 6 holes of 5 thou. This is my 5 thou area right there. But if I'm at a hard 90 right here, I'm only going to be feeding this because I've got 2 edges coming in with about a 3 thou surface area pushing fluid into that hole. Atomization here is very, very poor. So what we do next is we would do either abrasive flow machine or extrude hone. They're similar processes but different. And with extrude hone or AFM, we put this radius right here that I'm showing you with that arrow. Nice soft gentle radius, so when the needle valve comes up and it exposes this hole, instead of creating this low pressure area right here around this hard 90, we're going to flow in proper. So if this is like 5 or 6 thousandths, we're actually feeding that with more like 9 or 10 thousandths. So you have a pressure that's building up in this spray orifice. Nozzle thickness or spray orifice depth is 47 to about 60 thousandths of an inch, depending on the thickness of this area right here. You're 47 to 60 thou at most. If that area has any sort of surface finish in it, you impede or slow down the flow of fuel, and you want that flow. When this fluid comes out of here, it's going to be broken up into the just smallest microscopic little atomization dots on the planet. You want that atomization. There is a perfect and there is a wrong. Atomization is key because horsepower is generated off of however many cc's or millimeters cubed you actually burn. If you are in a super stock truck, you may pump 2.5 to 3 gallons of diesel in 300 feet, but going out the stack went probably at least 50% of it, and the reason for that is they're using the diesel to quench the exhaust gas temperature down to make sure that the motor doesn't melt itself to death. With fuel being $5.60 per gallon right now, you want to be sure that you're squeezing every ounce of all the energy out of the diesel possible. So if you've got an older style nozzle that's got this, you are inherently wasting some of your fuel and it's turning into black smoke. I just drove down to Salt Lake City last weekend to the Randy's Transmission event. Matt and myself, both driving 6.7 Cumminses, both towing trailers, down. We had one dinner at Applebee's. We had lots of gas station stops where you buy a Snickers bar and a Coke bottle and you jump in the truck and you roll out. We came home. We had one Comfort Inn, bougie, right? We had a Comfort Inn at 2 nights, and we spent $4,300 on that trip. It was all fuel. Like, the amount of goofing off or just excessive cash spending was almost none because it was a hot shot down. We did the event, we turned right around. Like I say, we did Applebee's one night, and dinner was a couple $100, but the rest of it was all fuel. So it's getting to be a real thing where we want to make sure that you guys are optimizing every single ounce of diesel you're pumping into your motors. EPA loves it too, so we want to make sure that we're trying to keep those guys happy and keep you out of their radar. So when we've got a spray orifice that we come up in here and we EDM, we add some K factor. That's what that little bell mouth is. The fuel coming out here breaks up into finer droplets. It's going to burn easier, better, cleaner. Truck's going to start better. Throttle response is going to be better. And then there's a few of you out there that are going to say, Len, that's not true, because I had a set of extrude hones in the past and they were super smoky. I believe you, because back in the old day, before we had an EDM and before we had blanks, We had to take factory parts out of other applications. It could be a Mack truck. It could be a John Deere tractor. It could have been 8.3 liter Cummins motorhome. And we put all these nozzles together. We figured out what was bigger to give you more fuel, make more power, and we basically put it into your Cummins pickup trucks. Or Duramax guys, you would take nozzles from other applications, put them into your Duramax motor. Spray angle wasn't exactly correct. Fuel economy is never going to be exactly correct either. With what we have going now, our own EDM, if you call me and say, hey, I want my nozzles to be EDM'd at 155.5 degrees, no problem. We can do that. If you want them at 156, we can do that. Want them at 157, we can do that. You tell us whatever you want, otherwise we're going to build you whatever we think is the absolute best at that current day. Blanks just opened up the whole world. Having the EDM opened up the whole world. And with us getting busier, the extrude hone machines were just far too slow. So we had to pick up the AFM, and we're having to rewrite recipes because of the AFM. But to keep things cheap as they can be for you, the less time we spend processing each part, the less time we have to charge you. So even though we're spending a bunch of money on tools, we're actually keeping the cost down, because as when we amortize that tool over a 10-year period, it's paying us back, so we can keep giving you a higher quality part using a better tool. Going back to the other side, let's talk about, we've talked about K factor, we've talked about liters per minute, spray hole size, and flow rate. If we burn 2 nozzles at, say, 5 holes at 12 thousandths of an inch, let's just say that we got a 5 by 12, 5 holes, 12 thou, and with EDM work only, that's going to flow about a 47 liters per minute, and that's going to have our hard edge. Now, with just 10 seconds worth of AFM, we're going to put that at about 51 liters per minute, and we're going to have a hole that has this nice smooth radius. Let me fix that a little bit. Okay, so back to flow rate and hole size. This is going to be 5 holes at 12 thousandths of an inch. This one with the hard 90s, no AFM, no extrude hone, it's going to flow like 47 liters per minute. And you're going to feed that with, because of the low pressure system right here and the low pressure system right here, you're actually feeding that with 6 to 7 thousandths of an inch. So the pressure leaving the front face is very low. Atomization is garbage. Example, any Dodge pickup truck that ever came with a VE pump, no matter what you did, they all had idle haze. Back when those trucks were new, abrasive flow machining or extrude honing was not being employed, and all of those nozzles had an idle haze. Our stuff that we build for those trucks today does not have idle haze, because we have K factor there. We're enhancing the fuel atomization coming out of the spray orifice, so we clean up that idle haze. Ours start better, ours come off the stoplights better, and they get better fuel economy because you're having to put less throttle input in because you're burning more of it instead of wasting out tailpipe. So if we take these 5 holes at 12 thou of an inch, you drive it around at 47 liters per minute, you're pretty happy. We bring them back in. We then take the exact same nozzle, we add some AFM or extrude hone, we give it about 10%, so we're up to about 51 liters per minute, and we give it K factor. Throttle response better, fuel economy better, overall drivability, like just the fun factor, trying to get out and pull around somebody without smoking them out, all of that stuff better with K factor. If we didn't have all those machines right here just under me at this very moment, and we had to send these parts out for all this kind of stuff, we also wouldn't have the ability to custom tune all of those different recipes. So if this is too big, altogether it's just too big, I'm going to come in with a smaller piece of wire. I'm going to make 5 holes. I'm going to make that at 11.5 thou, or maybe 11 thou 7/10. I'm still going to add my 10% of AFM or extrude hone, and I'm going to have a smaller nozzle flow rate. I'm going to end up with about a 49. Maybe that's perfect, absolute perfect for the actual recipe I'm getting at. Maybe it's still, maybe I couldn't even tell. Maybe there was such a small difference that I couldn't even tell, and they're both too big and they're both too smoky. Then I come in with, and I burn a 11 thou 2, or I burn just an 11 thou 0. In the old days, and I mean even 2 years ago, people were talking about 5x10s, 5x12s, 5x14s, 5x16s. Everybody who says that is buying stuff that's coming from China. It's been EDM'd. We get it in here, we put it in our Starret, which is just an optical, it's a computer attached to a screen, attached to a microscope, and we can measure spray hole orifices with the decimal point plus a bunch over, and those things aren't very accurate. Oftentimes people send those things in and they say, man, they always smoked, they never got good gas fuel economy. And basically what they did is they made the power that they were supposed to make because the bloody hole was so big. But because of this low pressure system, I can then take their 5x14s, turn those into like a 5x10 with K factor, and still have the same overall gross flow, but down where you're trying to drive it under boost works way better the whole way through. So bigger holes, not always better. Quite often, we're trying to go with smaller holes depending on where you're at on the tachometer. If you've got a T6 manifold and a Garrett or a big old SXE 5 series turbo on the manifold, that's going to be all for horsepower. Like that's a race application, that's not really this conversation. But my general speaking of all this stuff is to speak to you guys on the street. Towing your boats, towing your campers, towing your $150,000 horse trailers that are painted white with, you know, $300,000 horses in them. You don't want that stuff to be covered in soot all the time. You don't need it. Boy, what else? All right, so in closing, we've talked about nozzle hole size, we've talked about hole count, we've talked about K factor, we've talked about flow rate, we've talked about a lot. Just to keep it short and make sure you guys aren't falling asleep yet, I'll cut it here, and if you have any questions, please comment below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can, or feel free to email dynomitediesel.com at any given moment, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks guys, Lenny Reed, Dynomite Diesel Products. See ya.